Welcome to the Book of Days Project. As we gather around the fireside to impart some of the wisdom of times past and traditions, some forgotten, some just lying barely beneath the surface of our culture. January 29th, this day in history, according to our friend Robert Chambers. I will attempt to read as long a passage from the 29th as possible. There's not much here today. Let me get there, unprepared. Here we go. January 29th, born Emanuel Swedenborg in 1688. Thomas Paine, the political writer, in 1737. William Sharp, line engraver. Died Emperor Aurelian in 275. Bishop Sanderson in 1663. It is the feast day of Saint Sulpicius Severus. Died about 407. Saint Gildas, the Albanian or Scot, 512. Saint Gildas the Wise, or Badonicos Abbot, 570 perhaps. And Saint Francis of Sales. Let's read about Saint Gildas. This saint, according to his legend, was the son of Con, a king of the Britons of Alcloyd or Dumbarton, and was born sometime in the latter part of the 5th century. He was one of 24 brothers, the rest of whom were warriors and were, with their father, usually at war with King Arthur. But Gildas, having shown a disposition for learning, was sent to the school of the Welsh saint Iltutus. He afterwards went to study in Gaul, whence he returned to Britain and set up a school of his own in South Wales. Subsequently, at the invitation of St. Bridget, he visited Ireland, where he remained a long time and founded several monasteries. He returned to England, bringing with him a wonderful bell, which he was carrying to the Pope. And after having been reconciled with King Arthur, who had killed his eldest brother in battle, he proceeded on his journey to Rome. He went to Rome, from Rome to Ravenna, and on his way home stopped at Brice in Brittany, which was so tempting a place for a hermit that he determined to remain there, and he founded a monastery, of which he himself was the first abbot. The Bretons pretended that he died there, and they possessed his relics, but according to the Welsh legend, he returned to Wales. Let it not be forgotten, he returned to Wales, bringing back the wonderful bell, which was long preserved at Llancarvan, where he first took up his residence. He there became intimate with Saint Cadoc, and having the same taste, the two friends went to establish themselves as hermits in 2 desert islands in the estuary of the Severn, and fixed upon those which are now known by the names of Steepholm and Flatholm, Gildas choosing the later, and here they remained until they were driven away by the attacks of the northern pirates. Gildas then settled at Glastonbury, where he died and was buried in the church of St. Mary. St. Francis of Sales. If anyone is at a loss to understand how so much of the influence which the Church of Rome lost to Europe at the Reformation was afterwards regained, let him read the life of this remarkable man, St. Francis of Sales. Francis, Count of Sales, near Annecy, threw rank and fortune behind his back to devote himself to the interests of religion. His humility of spirit, his austerities, his fervid devotion gave him distinction as a preacher at a comparatively early age. He delivered the word of God with a mixture of majesty and modesty, had a sweet voice and an animated manner, but what chiefly affected the hearts of his hearers was the humility and unction with which he spoke from the abundance of his own heart. He went out among the poor, treating them with a meekness and kindness which wonderfully gained upon them. To this, in a great degree, it was owing that he brought, as has been alleged, above 70,000 of the Genovese Calvinists back to the Romish Church. Swedenborg. The life history of Swedenborg is very remarkable for its complete division into 2 parts, utterly alien from each other. The first 55 years devoted to pure science and official business under the King of Sweden. The last 28, spiritual mysticism was what he was devoted to, and the foundation of a new religion. His voluminous works on the latter class of subjects are generally felt to be unreadable. There can, however, be no reasonable doubt, as we believe, that the author was as sincere in his descriptions of the spiritual world as he had ever been in regard to the most material of his original studies. Perhaps, after all, there is some psychological problem yet to be satisfactorily made out regarding such mystics as he, resolving all into some law at present unknown. a letter written by the celebrated philosopher Kant in 1764, in which was published in his works, gives the following curious detail regarding Swedenborg, of whose possession of an extraordinary gift he considers it an undubitable proof. In the year 1756, says he, the true date, however, was 1759, when Monsieur de Swedenborg, towards the end of February, on Saturday at 4 o'clock p.m., arrived at Gothenburg from England, Mr. William Castell invited him to his house, together with a party of 15 persons. About 6 o'clock, Monsieur de Swedenborg went out, and after a short interval returned to the company quite pale and alarmed. He said that a dangerous fire had broken out in Stockholm at the Söderhamn. Stockholm is about 300 miles from Gothenburg, and that it was spreading very fast. He was restless and went out often. He said that the house of one of his friends, whom he named, was already in ashes, and that his own was in danger. At 8 o'clock, after he had been out again, he joyfully exclaimed, "Thank God, the fire is extinguished, the third door from my house." 300 miles away, huh? This news occasioned great commotion through the whole city, and particularly amongst the company in which he was. It was announced to the governor the same evening. On Sunday morning, Swedenborg was sent for by the governor, who questioned him concerning the disaster. Swedenborg described the fire precisely how it had begun, and in what manner it had ceased, and how long it had continued. On the Monday evening, a messenger arrived at Gothenburg, who was dispatched during this time of the fire. In the letters brought by him, the fire was described precisely in the manner by Swedenborg stated. Swedenborg. George III. Marks the death of George III on this day in the year 1820. It was an event of no political consequence, as for 10 years he had been secluded under mental eclipse. But his people reflected with a feeling of not unkindly interest on his singularly long reign. So long it was that few remembered any other. His venerable age, 82, his reproachable character as a family man, and the many remarkable things which had fallen out in his time. Amiable people of little reflection viewed him as the good old king, the supporter of safe principles in church and state, the friend of religion and virtue. Others of keener intelligence pointed to the vast amount of disaster which had been brought upon the country, mainly through his wrong judgment and obstinacy. The American colonies lost, a fatal interference with the concerns of France in 1793, an endangerment of the peace of the country through a persistent rejection of the claim for Catholic emancipation. To these people the rule of George III appeared to have been unhappy from the beginning. He had never ceased to struggle for an increase of the kingly authority. Sounds like another George more recent to us in history. He could endure no minister who would not be subservient to him. Any officer who voted against his favorite ministers in Parliament he marked in a black list which he kept, and either dismissed him at once or stopped his promotion. A particular cohort, amounting to 15 or 20 in the House of Commons, were recognized as the king's friends from the readiness they sheaved to do his bidding and act for his interests on all occasions, and this unconstitutional arrangement was calmly submitted to. A great deal of what was amiss in the king's system of government might be traced to miseducation under a bad mother, who continually dinned to his ear, "George, be a king," and preceptors who were disaffected to revolutionary principles. Like other weak men, he could not understand a conscientious dissent from his own opinion. He argued thus: "I think so and so, and I am conscientious in thinking so, ergo any other opinion must be unconscientious." Thus you have it. George III, dead on this day in 1820. Thank you for coming back to us here on the Book of Days. Don't forget to submit your own entry into the Book of Days. We can supply you with all the necessary material to participate in this grand project of ours. Thank you for joining us. Adieu.